I'm pleased to introduce to you Pauline Richards and Linda Griepentrog, who are co-authors of Needle Felting, by Hand or Machine. For those of us who might be unfamiliar with this art, Pauline, can you explain for us first what felting is?
Needle felting is a process where you use a special needle that has barbs, and on the downward stroke, the barbs catch fibers and push them into the base fabric. And it can be done with individual needles, needles in a group, or by a machine.
When you mention using needles in a group, does that mean you use multiple colors at a time?
Well, you could use several fibers, but by needles in a group, you have one needle that you use individually, or there are tools that can be used to hold anywhere from 2 or 3 to up to 20 or more individual felting needles, and you'd use that as a hand tool. That's why it can be done by hand or machine.
I understand that there are now machines made for accomplishing needle felting, but it's also long been done by hand.
That's correct. Most major machine companies have come out with dedicated felting machines, meaning that that's all they do. They don't sew or they don't embroider. This is like another thing that you can get for your sewing room. They're smaller than a regular embroidery machine or a regular sewing machine, and they have the special needles that Pauline just mentioned already into the machine, and the bobbin mechanism is non-existent, so you're just essentially poking fibers down through fabric.
So in needle felting, whatever you use on top functions almost as thread would, but no actual stitches are being formed.
Some people refer to it as stitchless sewing.
Right, because there's no thread, there's no tension, there's no bobbin. All you have is the needles poking fibers, either yarns or roving or fabric. You can actually felt with fabric to other base fabrics using these barbed needles.
Does the shrinking property of wool come into needle felting projects at all?
It can. You can do needle felting, and then you can shrink the fibers, and then you can add other details. So there are lots of different options.
There's really 2 kinds of felting. One's called dry felting, which is really what needle felting is. And then there's wet felting, which is what most knitters use to shrink something after they have created it. And you're taking advantage either way of the characteristics of wool fibers for the most part, because the wool fibers have scales on them that interlock, and so even if you're doing dry felting, they still stay together.
Tell us a little bit about what we'll see inside the book.
There's 15 projects in the book. And in the case where any kind of patterning is needed, those patterns are included in the book as well. We have things for a variety of different levels of skills, from the person who's never used a barb needle before in their life, clear up to somebody who's a little more advanced. We tried to do things that we know will engender success, so that people will take off from those projects and go forth and do other kinds of things that they develop on their own.
Do you have a favorite among the projects that you created in this book?
I think it's the sweater project, where I used a recycled sweater and made it into a knitting needle case. I did both wet and dry needle felting on it, adding beads too. And it's just a lovely project, easy to do, could be transferred to garments, just very versatile.
It sounds like something that would be really fun for any of us with an interest in crafting. You can really pull all the other crafts together with needle felting.
It's addictive.
It is. It's addictive, and it's one more thing to start making a stash of. Different kinds of fibers, different kinds of yarns, because you can pull apart yarns to create the original fibers they were made from, which gives them a totally different look than when they're tightly twisted as yarns. Spread it out thinly, and it works great.
It's really fun.
Very fun.
You heard it here. Needle Felting by Hand or Machine by Linda Griepentrog and Pauline Richards.